Hi there, this is Kick the Acorn, and this is Unit 1 review for AP European. So, in case you haven't seen this channel and you're new to it, we have AP reviews on here, so they may be helpful. This can be used for the Unit 1 tests that you may have for this course, or just review for the exam, either one. But this will be a long video because there's a lot of topics in these 9 units. Some teachers have different kinds of course setups, but for College Board there's 9 units. So here's the 11 key topics that we have. I'm not going to read them out, but just so you know, that's what we'll be going over. Here are the key terms. So these are terms that you're going to want to know what they mean for this unit. So that's a lot, I know, but still, that's just what you should know. A lot of these they're easy to remember, and some you might already know anyways. So then we have key people. These are the main people of this unit. And this is the time period. So these units aren't necessarily chronological, they overlap. Like the next unit won't start after 1700, it will start in like as early as to 1400s even. So here's our first topic on the Black Death. So this is also known as the Black Plague, and it was first brought to Europe in 1347 in trade ships. So there were trade ships that always sailed around the Mediterranean, but somewhere along the line they picked up this disease and they brought it to Italy. And they had rats and fleas on the ship, and they are what spread the disease. It spread rapidly due to a lack of hygiene, so people weren't aware of the things they should be doing, like washing their hands and other things that maybe are left unsaid. But anyways, no one knew how to treat the plague, and some things that they tried to do, they were really bad. Like they try to have leeches suck blood out of you or something like that. They thought that would be good, but no, that's even worse. Because there can be some disease you can get just from that. And in a lot of cases in European history, Jews are blamed for crises, and this is one case. So unfortunately, Jews were blamed for this, and hatred spread, just like in other times. And it's estimated that between 50% to 67% of Europeans died in this disease, so that's a whole lot. Not even 1% of the population has died from the coronavirus, which is one these days, luckily. And because of this decreased population, labor shortage occurred. Our next topic, 2 out of 11, is the 100 Years' War. The causes, well, first of all, it was from 1337 to 1453, so it was actually 116 years. Note that the conflict had some pauses, so it's not like they were fighting for 116 years. Maybe they're like, oh, for these 3 years, didn't fight. I don't know how it was, but I know that it wasn't all that time. And it was caused by conflicting land holdings in England and France. And this resulted in the war, and so this is a feudal monarchy that France had, and that's what caused this, which is having these land holdings. Oh, I thought I skipped a slide, sorry. At first, England was successful due to advanced weapons like the long bow. That was a weapon that could be used, and France lacked unity. In 1415, King Henry V of England was able to conquer France. But then there is Joan of Arc, who was only 17, and she was able to kick out the English forces. Not completely, obviously, but she was able to create a resistance, and that was a success on the French side. But unfortunately, she was captured and killed by the English. But this only made her a martyr, so that made the French even angry, and that was not a good thing for the English because that created a further obstacle. And the war ended up phasing out pretty much, but tension still existed and really um, did until like the World Wars even, because um, just things like that. There's always been differences between those two nations. I think everything's fine now, but that's just how it's been. So then we're now going to look at changes in the Catholic Church. So in the Catholic Church, the papacy was really powerful, and that's what everyone listened to. Well, mostly everyone. But then the papacy decided, well, they decided to move it to France in 1309, and then it was taken away from there in 1377. But in this time, the power of the papacy declined. The popes were threatened, and only the manifesto could settle this conflict. That was something that was able to do that, and this is the beginning of a religious controversy, and the Reformation is soon. So this is not good for the Catholic Church because now people are starting to question the authority of the Pope. Now let's look at the Italian Renaissance. This is probably one of the most important topics in this unit. So there's new ideals. In the early days, Italy was divided into many kingdoms and city-states. So instead of right now where it's just one nation, it was Italy, but it had Florence and Sicily and um, all of these different city-states. So this unity was not necessarily a thing until the 1860s, which we'll talk about that in a different video, but not this one. The Renaissance is believed to start. It believes. What am I trying to say? It started in Florence, basically, and due to the troubles of the plague and other factors, they wanted to express their experiences in art and literature. And the Renaissance means rebirth. So there's Petrarch, who he recognized this rebirth, and he realized that this was an opportunity for him to spread his ideas. And he believed in humanism, which was that one should study the Italian and Greek classical literature and recognize the human accomplishments. This kind of ties into secularism, which was practiced um, in at this time, in which the accomplishments of God were not emphasized as much. So they're focusing on the human accomplishments more than that of God, and this could have roughly been due to the papacy that we issue that we talked about a couple minutes ago. That doesn't mean that they're atheist or they're ignoring it, but they are not focusing on it as much. They're not as devoted. Then there's individualism, in which many decided how the individual should be. So you do this, that's how you should be. So there's literature, and there was Castiglione, who made a how-to book called The Courtier. And in there, he basically states how the average person should be. Then there was political individualism and Machiavelli's The Prince. So instead of just some normal person, what about someone in the high class? What should they do? He states that you should be feared but respected. So that's based on classical ideas. That's literature of the Italian Renaissance. Then there's art, and with the art, there's patrons who supported these artists by paying them to paint or sculpt, sometimes for their purpose, like so they can gain power or respect or dignity or whatever it is. And Lorenzo de' Medici was one of these. And there's lots of different artists that we're not going to talk about. They call them the Ninja Turtle ones that they're named after. But there's Michelangelo, who advocated for naturalism and realism, which is basically just making accurate perceptions of the human body. Like this David statue, which it's too accurate that I had to put that box on there. And then there's Raphael's School of Athens, which reflected beliefs in classical individuals. And there's lots of different scientists and different figures here that are working together, although they definitely didn't live at the same time. So that was Italian Renaissance. Now we have the Northern Renaissance as it moves later on to Northern Europe. So as it moves to Northern Europe, some ideas changed. So there was Northern humanism, a different kind that branched off from that, in which classical ideas could be merged with religious ones. So instead of just focusing on classical texts, maybe just of classical individuals, maybe that of the Bible too. And in England, Netherlands, and the Holy Roman Empire, they applied these ideas primarily. Also in France, some. So in Northern literature, there was Erasmus, he wanted to look at Christian texts, and he called for reform in this society, and he believed that all should be educated on these Christian texts. Then there was Thomas More in England, who he wanted a perfect society, and he based that off of classic texts, and he states that in his book Utopia, which means perfect society. Instead of dystopia, that's not a perfect society. And in the art was still commissioned, so it was commissioned in Italian Renaissance as well by the patrons, but there was differences. They mostly had everyday life scenes instead of just religious scenes and naked people. And then there was different tools like oil paint, and sometimes wood was used. And detail was emphasized also, and Jan van Eyck was one of these artists. There's one of those paintings from the time. So then there's the printing press. So before the invention of the printing press, which by the way is something that could produce text quickly, which we'll talk about in a second, but printing was slow and usually only in Latin but by this time, not that many people knew Latin and didn't even know how to read because of this. So there's Johann Gutenberg, who found a cheaper way to print, which is the printing press. It could print faster in all languages or vernacular ones, which means that they're widely spoken. So instead of just Latin, there's English, French, German, Italian, whatever it happens to be. So the effects is now ideas can spread quickly, like the Renaissance ones. This helped to spread those ideas. Literacy increased, and maps and data were spread, and people could finally understand their rights. So this caused some conflict because people began to question their authority and revolt because they realized, oh, well, that's not fair. And religious tensions were also created, and this set ground for the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther was already thinking at this time. So then there's also new monarchies at this time. So new ideas bring new monarchies. So the Renaissance and printing press allowed for new monarchies, and there was political ideas that wanted to limit the aristocracy nobility, which were basically just the high classes, the rich high classes, but the new individual leaders, such as kings, they wanted all the power, and they would push away from these high class groups. They actually wrote down laws, and Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain were some of the first monarchists, and they limited power to others and created police forces and religion to sustain their power. And they established the Spanish Inquisition for these purposes. King Henry VII of England gained the throne after defeating the War of Roses, which is one of these high classes of the nobility, and he eliminated the nobility for the purpose of his power. His son, King Henry VIII, continued his ideals, which we'll talk about him in a different video. So then there's the Age of Exploration. So when and why? So this was primarily from 1490 to 1700. There was navigation tools like the compass, caravel, and astrolabe, which the caravel is a ship and the astrolabe, I don't know if that's how you say it, but it was something that determined latitude. These allowed for exploration, so they could actually know where they were. And then map making or cartography also improved, although it wasn't completely accurate. And this isn't supposed to be here, this text. I'll talk about it in a minute. But the primary reasons for colonization were God, gold, and glory, or the 3 Gs. They wanted to spread religion, they wanted to get raw materials, and they wanted to spread their power or glory. So the results, they were able to defeat Native American forces or any natives of where they colonized due to their military and technological advantages. And they found new materials and foods, and there was a Columbian exchange where they exchanged foods from continent to continent, or world to world, as they called it, because they called it the New World. But unfortunately, there was also diseases that came with that, but not that many that were bad for the Europeans, but definitely bad for the natives that they weren't immune to, and this killed off a lot of them. And these were the reasons that Christopher Columbus did his voyages. So there's a new kind of economy established once there's colonization, and this is mercantilism. Sorry, that's supposed to be underlined. That's a vocab word. And it was a newly used idea in which findings in the nations are crucial. So whatever you find, that's needed. Exports should exceed imports. So you should be giving things away more than you take in. And naval power is crucial, and colonial possessions are crucial, and trade and economic processes must be controlled. With all this, that's how the upper class can be rich, and that's what this video is, Mercantilism Rap, and you should watch that if you don't understand what this means, because it explains it. So then, now let's talk about new empires. So we talked about new monarchies. What about new empires? So, of course, exploration couldn't go without conflict. So there is the 5 main countries, Portugal, Spain, France, England, and the Netherlands. They had their empires around the world. And the Portuguese, they mostly just went in Africa and South America. And the Spanish mostly just went in the Americas, Caribbean, and Pacific. The French went in only North America, mostly. And then the English established an empire in North America. And the Dutch, which, in case you didn't know, that means Netherlands, they established small empires, so that wasn't all concentrated in one area. They had just like a little thing here, a little thing there. And that's a map of the empires. Sorry, there's no color coding, but the blue would be the French, the yellow is the English, the green is the Spanish, the orange is, what would that be? That would be the Portuguese, and then the purple would be Dutch. So as you can see, this is applied. This still applies today. We know that we speak English in America, and they speak Spanish in Latin America right here, and in Brazil they speak Portuguese, and that's all because of this. So there were conflict. Different countries thought they should be in one place, and that the other country shouldn't. So how do they overcome this conflict? There could be peace, like the Treaty of Tordesillas, which created a line across it pretty much took off part of South America, but it was a straight line down that split apart the Spanish and Portuguese territories, although this was not considering any of the other nations that colonized. And then there was also war. Violence also was used, and this is considered coercion. And the Peace of Utrecht, hopefully I'm saying that right, it ended the Spanish War of Succession, which stopped this. But that's why I say, but then peace, because there has to be peace. But that's what occurred due to this. So now we'll look at slave trade. So unfortunately, slavery existed. Europeans took advantage of populations that were vulnerable and did not have much development. So from 1444 to 1865, roughly, 1865 being the end of the American Civil War, because Europe abolished slavery before America did, although some slavery still exists even today, unfortunately. Slave trade of Africans primarily. Sometimes natives of America, but usually Africans. I think, well, this was primarily because they, Native Americans, like I said, they got killed off by the diseases, but the Africans were immune to it. So this was one reason why they did that. In the Atlantic slave trade, they got moved to the Americas, and they were forced to work. This was considered to be needed. That's what colonizers said. They wanted costless labor, and many died on the journey and from diseases. Not all diseases were immune to. So then there's the commercial revolution. This is our last topic. Innovations occurred in banking. So they realized, well, we have all this new profit. We need to actually have a sustainable economy. So the Bank of Amsterdam is established, in which currency can be used for one of the first times. So not just like, oh, I'll give you this, you take that. No bartering. Now they actually can have something that's worth money. And the economic elite, they helped to create these developments, like the Medicis. And in the enclosure movement in England, land was taken from owners, and it was taken into common land recognition. So they basically just took the land. They're like, this belongs to the nation, not you. And new developments occurred in techniques like crop rotation, in which, to avoid wearing down the land, they changed the crop. And in the price revolution, prices rose due to influxes in gold and silver, resulting in food shortages. So there were some negative results in this, and that was the price revolution. So thank you for watching. That'll be it for this video. Pretty long video, sorry about that, but that's what you have to do to get through this content. So thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one.